Well, you're racist to even question. This is not about race. It's not about gender. It's about the Constitution. It's about rule of law. It's about protecting and preserving our national heritage and our sovereignty. And so, the question came up that, well, this guy's got a lot of ties to, Kenya and other places, and there doesn't seem to be any identifying records that are credible. All of this was coming up the first time he ran, early, before he was even elected, this was coming up. Mm-hmm. Hillary Clinton's campaign mm-hmm. brought it up.
That's right.
They have actually admitted to the fact.
Yes.
They were the first birthers. I just want to make that clear. People always attack people like us, say, bunch of birthers. Well, does that mean you hate Hillary Clinton then? Because the people that say that usually are big supporters of hers, because she started it and they admitted it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so I just wanted to throw that in there because it was important to her when she was running. She thought it might be unfair to be running against somebody that wasn't even from here. Mm-hmm. That was what they were proposing. Okay, so the bottom line is, so since all of that came up way back, when he went in, and of course Obama and his people around him were saying, oh no, that's ridiculous, he is, and if you're a birther, you're a racist, and all these pejoratives started being attached to anybody who dared question it, okay? Of course, Hillary Clinton got real quiet. Somebody shut her down. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And we know what happened. She loses, but she becomes Secretary of State, and then she runs for president. So we know what happened with that. So the bottom line is this issue is important because it goes to our Constitution, it goes to our sovereignty, it goes to rule of law, it goes to whether or not our constitutional republic can survive. Let's just pretend, for the sake of this conversation, that it turns out that Obama was not from here at all, wasn't born here at all. Well, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Now, if it turns out that he was, okay, then it's settled. But the problem is that the only identifying document that has ever been presented to the public as proof of citizenship, proof that he was born here,
a natural-born citizen,
is a document that purports that he was born in Hawaii at Kapi'olani Hospital in a certain year, certain place, certain time, and they put it on the White House website, on a government website, and said, this is it. This is identifying document.
A birth certificate.
A birth certificate. Mm-hmm. So the whole story we're getting ready to unpack, and I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning and bring your viewers on this journey that not only will cover a lot of territory that some people already know, but a lot of people won't know any of this. Mm-hmm. But by the time we get near the end of this conversation we're having, there will be brand new stuff, and new stuff along the way, but brand new earth-shattering stuff that's tied to the Mueller report, the Mueller mm-hmm. investigation, what all that was about, things that the Mueller report actually confirmed and admitted that do tie to the birth certificate investigation. The Mueller report doesn't even know it. Mm-hmm. They don't even know it, and yet it's in the Mueller report. Powerful, powerful, earth-shattering revelations for your audience. But the whole thing is, what makes this important is that we have to protect the office of presidency. We have to protect, we're the number one superpower in the world. We've got nuclear weapons that no other nation has, a mm-hmm. nuclear arsenal and nuclear delivery systems. Well, what if a foreign power has usurped the military, the government, and the red button? Mm-hmm. What if? Mm-hmm. Not saying that happened, but what if? These are the things we need to protect. And so this investigation has to be done. It has to be looked at deeply by Congress, because now a 5-year criminal investigation done by the 4th largest sheriff's office in the nation has concluded that the only identifying document the public has ever seen is an absolute ground-up forgery fabrication started with a blank document mm-hmm. and digitally manipulated to present. Now, you begin by asking the question, why would any president or administration do that? There are no good answers to that question. There are several answers. Number one, he doesn't have one. Number two, he wasn't born here. Number three, he was, but he's just jerking the American public around because he can. Well, that's not good.
Yeah.
We don't need a president lying to everybody just to be funny or whatever. So none of the answers are good. None of them are good if that birth certificate is an absolute forgery. And I'm here to tell your audience, and we will prove it as we go forward. They will actually see with their own eyes. They will actually see. They will see how it was manipulated digitally, and they will understand why I'm so passionate about this.
Well, and this confirmed by 2 different independent forensic, world-famous forensic
laboratories. One in Europe, one in the United States, double-blind. Neither one of them knew that the other one was looking at the information that the sheriff's office provided them. So we'll get to that in this story. But to your original question, that's why this is so important. Mm-hmm. It's monumentally important. And it's like Sheriff Arpaio and Mike Zullo said, and again, I'll tell your audience how they got involved, but it's like they've said all along. This is not a birther issue to them. They didn't really set out to investigate where he was really born. They just set out to investigate the document that was proffered as his identifying document.
Yeah, let's start there.
And there's a story behind why that was done. And this is, so it's not a birther issue, and it's not an issue of anything else but that. But that's important because they didn't set out to dethrone the president. They didn't set out to put anybody in prison, and that was never, they didn't say, now we're going to do this, we're going to put people in prison over this. They're just saying, we're trying to prove whether or not this is an accurate and true document. So what they have said all along is if it proves that it's not, at the very least, people say, well, what do you want to come from this? At the very least, let's pass laws to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Ever, at the very least. Now, if there was some huge deep state conspiracy to effect a coup against our nation, then probably people do need to go to prison. Okay, so that was the mindset of this whole thing. All right, now let me just back up to how this story affected me. How I got a preacher on the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, that's what I want to know. How did you get involved?
I was a former cop and a preacher.
And I actually understand there's kind of a supernatural.
There's some
element.
supernatural elements in it. It's unbelievable, this whole story. So I think your audience is going to really enjoy this whole story as we unpack it together. But here's how the whole thing started with me. If I miss a detail or two or a date or two, I'm going to ask your audience to forgive me. This is off my head. I don't have reams of notes here, but I've been dealing with this at a deep, deep level for many years. It's like I was telling you guys before we went on the camera here, and we had a several-hour meeting just talking about these things, and I told you guys, my problem is I have too much information up here. So my brain's trying to sort through it. So anyway, here's how it all started. So as a pastor on the Gulf Coast, as of the filming of this, I've been the senior pastor of one church for 33 years. But early days, back in 2007, 2008, leading up to that election, 2008, which Barack Obama would win, I was a co-host. I had my own show, but I also was a co-host on a morning show on the Gulf Coast on a pretty powerhouse AM radio station, which now is simulcasting with a FM station and part of a conglomerate, so it's really big now. But I was a co-host on that show, and we took callers. And a caller called in and addressed directly to me because they knew that I was a staunch patriot and a conservative Christian. And they said, well, you do know that this guy that's running for president, Barack Obama, this senator, who looks like he's in the lead now and might win, you do know that he's not even from here. He's not even born here. And I'm listening to this. This is the first this had ever been suggested. I mean, remember this is 2007. The internet, the way we know the internet now, in 2007, it was still fairly young. I mean, it really was. I mean, it just multiplies exponentially how the internet works every year. So this is 2007. I get this call, and they're saying, he's not even from here. I said, what do you mean he's not from here? Oh, he doesn't have a legitimate birth certificate. There are no records, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can remember I was not ugly to the guy, but I was not disparaging. But I just kind of said, well, sir. I said, I can't imagine that. See, this is how naive we all were. We didn't know that we knew about the deep state in 2007.
Right.
Many of us suspected it. We knew there were some shenanigans, shadow governments and all that we called it. We didn't really know this huge collusion conspiracy between the mainstream media and the White House and under the Obama White House, it was on steroids. We didn't know any of that to the level we know it now. So I'm sitting here as a former cop, and in one of those sheriff's office, I did my own investigations. I was never called a detective or investigator, but I did conduct criminal investigations to the point of going to trial with them and putting people in prison. So I've had investigative experience. So with my law enforcement experience, my investigative experience, they're questioning, and plus I'm now a pastor, I'm a patriot, I'm on radio. So they're saying to me, this guy's not eligible. And I said, that can't be. Congress would never allow it. The courts would never allow it. Yeah. Surely the media would burn that down. They would dig it out and burn. So naive, not knowing all of those people were either compromised or in collusion to a lot of things that were going on, much less the fact that now we're getting ready to have a president that to this day, no one has ever seen a valid documentation. By the time we finish this show, your audience that's doubting right now will understand why I say we have never seen a valid identifying document.
It's overwhelming.
Never. It's overwhelming, the evidence. So So I get this call, it's 2007, and I said, well, I don't think, and I made all my arguments, but he was emphatic. He said, I'm telling you, you research it, you do some research, you'll discover. Okay. I kind of forgot about it. A few months later, we're moving forward, the election's getting closer. Now it's looking like the dude is going to win, Barack Obama. And, you know, again, nothing racially, I don't care. Is he black, male, female, Democrat, Republican? If he's Constitution-loving, he's going to take our nation forward. So I'm looking at it as objectively as I can, but I start doing a little investigation. I start cruising around on the internet and discovering all of these different people who have been looking at it. And I said, well, you know, there might be something to it. And so I started talking about it, kind of putting it out there, and we had other callers call, and people were giving their opinions. Nothing really official yet. But then I was in a motel room in Central Florida. I was getting ready to preach a week-long conference, and I'm in my motel room, and I've got it on Fox News. And I heard with my own ears, I doubt if we'll ever find the transcripts of this, but there are transcripts that speak about it that I have found. I heard Hillary Clinton with my own ears. I called the pastor because he knew that I was already beginning to smell a rat in this. I said, turn on Fox right now. She's actually talking about it. And she was saying very stoically, yes, in my campaign, because see, she was leading. Now she's behind and she's panicking. She's on Fox News. She's being interviewed. She says, yes, well, we've got information I'm going to be releasing in a few days that will show that he's not even eligible to run. And that was all she said. And the Fox News reporter said, really? And everybody was fairly naive back then.
Sure. Yeah.
And she says, yes, in just a few days, we'll have this information out. And so I called him. He heard it. The pastor heard it. So I know I'm not dreaming it. I saw it. I heard it. The pastor heard it. He said, this is unbelievable. It's what you've been talking about, the possibility. So I watched Fox News every day for the next 4 or 5 days, because that's when she said it was never mentioned again by anybody. Hillary Clinton never mentioned it. It kept going right up to 2008. Barack Obama was in the lead. She never mentioned it again. I never heard anything. And then it dawned on me, something bad is happening here. She's been gotten to. Somebody has told her to shut up. I mean, that's what I was just conjecturing. So I'm watching all this. I'm explaining how I got involved in this. Well, in the meantime, Barack Obama wins. He goes in. Again, Mr. Objectivity and Mr. Mr. Positivity. I'm saying to people, well, look, he's a Democrat, he's fairly liberal, but he's the president now, and so I hope he'll do good for the nation. I'm going to support him as much as I can. Let's pray for him. The whole thing that you would say, rah, rah, America.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I said, this could be good. America's first black president. And maybe he can heal some race relations. Oh my gosh, how did that work out for you? But anyway, that's what my attitude was. So I'm saying this to kind of defend myself. Once I got deep into this, it was never a birther thing. It was never a racial thing. It was never a political thing. Like, I don't want a Democrat in there, I want a Republican, so I'm going to try to burn this guy. No, It became a law enforcement thing and a constitutional thing.
Right.
But so he wins, and I'm having this positive attitude moving forward. And the next thing you know, people are really jabbing because the Obama campaign never answered the question, not publicly, not officially, of are you even qualified?
Well, I remember at the time lawyers and even politicians were saying, look, you can settle this issue in one day. Just provide your birth certificate. They were saying that over and over.
Not only that, but when the Congressional Research Committee finally got involved in it, that's the big research arm of the federal government. They produced official documents stating, when they kept being questioned by some congressmen early on, they produced official documents saying, well, in reality, there is no mechanism. There is no mechanism whereby a candidate for president is forced to provide documentation. In other words, the Constitution says you must be this, this, and this. The only mechanism is that the party that presents their candidate has to sign off to all of the states. They have to produce a document. We find that he is eligible, and he is our submission, or she is our candidate, and they are eligible as according to the Constitution, Article so, Section so and so. That's what, and Nancy Pelosi signed that for him. Okay, so in the Congressional Research Investigative Committee, they actually produced a document saying that, no, he hasn't presented anything because he was not required to present anything. Nobody's ever been required. So if you don't like it, then change the law. But for right now, there's no mechanism. So we had that to deal with.
Wow.
So it was like Barack Obama almost had a free pass in those days. He was kind of doing this to the public and to the media for the longest. Like,
and his backers, too, because they must have known the backstory and said, don't worry about it.
That's right. Don't worry about it. You don't have to.
Yeah.
And so his people, not Obama himself necessarily, but all of his people were pointing to the Congressional Research Committee, pointing to Nancy Pelosi's signature. We've been certified. The certification is what it is. The certification. We're certified. Nancy Pelosi signed it, Speaker of the House, our party. Yeah, everything's legal. It's all been done legal. But people kept saying, important people back then were saying, just provide. Just a document. Give us a document. So the next thing that happened in 2008, I think, maybe 2009, what we now know as the infamous short form birth certificate appeared on the government White House website, and they were pointing to that. See, this is it. Well, this was like, I forgot the official name now. Forgive me, I don't have my notes, but it wasn't a birth certificate as we know, the doctor's name, the hospital, all this stuff, a seal from the Department of Health director. It was a verification that a birth certificate exists. And they said, I forgot what it was called, but it was certificate of birth. I think it was just a certificate saying, yes, a birth occurred here. And this is the dude, and Barack Obama, and this year, and this month, and this day, yes, a birth occurred here. And he had that up there. Here's my document. Everybody went, that's crazy. I can't get a pack of bubble gum with that. Yeah. I can't get a driver's license.
That's similar to what I tried to use in the state of Indiana to get a driver's license.
Yes.
They said, no.
No. That ain't flying. There's no state that will give you a driver's license or state ID on a certificate of, we got something back here in our archives on this guy, so go ahead, No, you can't run for any office on that. You can't get jobs with that. But yet he's the commander-in-chief, and this is what he offers? Well, that's when I really began to smell a rat. Not that I questioned the veracity, how that short form was put together, whether or not it was corrupt.
Yeah.
I was just saying, that's ridiculous. I can't get my son on a softball team with that. How can he be commander-in-chief and have his finger on a red button with that? How can that be? So that's when I really started smelling a rat. Well, eventually, and I don't remember all the details and the intrigue, but eventually that got taken down, because I do remember his press secretary, and I can't remember his name right now, I can see his face, but he used to mock the reporters that would ask questions about that, and he would say, look, Hawaii doesn't even provide a long-form birth certificate anymore. This is all Hawaii provides. He's given you what they provide. Now, you guys need to let this go. Because he's kept the law. He's been certified by his party. He has been duly elected. The people want him. He is the president. He's got the short form up there. Hawaii doesn't even provide a long form. That thing doesn't even exist now. That's something of the past. So that was a pretty hard thing to kind of come against. But then somebody discovered that short form had been manipulated. I think the number was completely wrong,
right,
or something. Was that correct?
I think because they're issued sequentially, and it would have been on the wrong date for his birth.
Yes. So then that was taken down. It was like, and then I said, oh my gosh! Now, not only do we have all of this intrigue and all of this smelling of rotten fish, but now even the Obama administration is saying, oops, and taking it down. That's when, in the last of 2010, the beginning of 2011, a gentleman by the name of Donald Trump got involved in the whole thing. He too, for whatever reason, was watching all of this. I think he had plans way back then to one day run for president.
Yeah.
He had those aspirations, but that's not really germane to what he was saying. He was following all this. He's watching the presidential election process. He's evaluating it, so when he runs, he's watching this man go in office. He's watching all this intrigue. He starts checking all this stuff out, and he comes to his conclusion, with I'm sure his investigators, whoever he put on it, that this stinks to high heaven. Now, at this point, there's really no official documentation yet, but he's president. He's moving on. Well, in the meantime, Jerome Corsi, Dr. Jerome Corsi writes a book, Where's the Birth Certificate?
Right.
Remember that?
Yep.
Okay, and so that's starting to come to a head. He'd already written the Swift Boat, what was it, Swift Boat?
Yeah,
Captain knows Swift Boat something, and it was it John Kerry?
Yes, it was about John Kerry.
Yeah, who was running for president, and that book basically cost Kerry the election. And now comes a book, Where's the Birth Certificate, by this same investigative reporter. The Democrats began to panic. The Obama administration's panicking. Trump is metaphorically punching Obama in the chest and the media, saying, if you've got a birth certificate, put it up there.
Yeah.
You're talking about lawyers and everybody.
Everybody.
Well, Trump was a huge voice in that. He's a multi-billionaire. He's got his own TV show. He's sniffing around about being a politician, and now he's out there challenging Obama. Well, he became a hero to the people like myself and others that were saying, this thing just stinks. I don't know if he's really from here, I'll support him, but if he's not, I want him out of there. You know? And not because he's black, not because he's a Democrat, not because I don't like his politics, but because I love the Constitution and our nation and the sovereignty of our nation. So I'm listening to Trump and I think, this is amazing. This story's getting, and I'm on the radio and I'm talking about this and I'm reporting it. So the next thing that happens in this is right when Corsi's getting ready to release his book, two things happen. Barack Obama, at the prodding of Donald Trump said, if you'll put it up there, I'll give you $1 million to your charity or something like that. Do you remember that? I mean, there was these real challenges just calling Obama's bluff. It got to the point where Obama had to put up or shut up. And I know it made him uncomfortable, made him mad. It made him hate Donald Trump. Does that explain anything to you?
Oh, sure.
Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because now we're on the other side of Trump actually winning and taking over after Obama, and the Mueller report that now we know or believe that traces back to the Obama administration. See, I'm telling you guys, this stuff is deep and it's very connected. So now what happens in this saga is that 2011 is piling in. Of course, he's getting ready to release his book. They've already released some snippets. It's leaking to the media. Trump has basically put his finger in the eye of Obama. Obama's attorneys are sent to Hawaii to get documentation from a woman named Loretta Fuddy. We can talk about that later. Arpaio and Zullo's investigation had nothing to do with what happened to Loretta Fuddy, but I'm just saying that. They bring this information back. They claim that they make a copy of the documents they have, put it in PDF format, put it on the White House website, and lo and behold, it is exactly what Obama's press secretary said Hawaii didn't possess, couldn't get, didn't do anymore, and could never release. But lo and behold, there's a long-form birth certificate up there. Immediately, people who were already smelling the rat said, wait a minute. We were expecting maybe an updated and corrected short form. Now a long form appears. The thing you said could never happen, and magically it appears because Trump's doing this to him. Right behind that, two things happen. First of all, the birth certificate's put up. Of course, his book comes out. They start trashing the book, and they kill Osama bin Laden and change the news cycle. It all happened right there, crammed in together. I knew then. I mean, I didn't know anything forensically yet, but I knew then. We're in a mess. This guy is desperately, his administration, they are desperately covering this up. There's something they're ashamed of. Again, Mr. Objectivity. I still didn't go to the birther thing like he wasn't born here. I went to, there's something he's embarrassed about. I don't know, maybe it shows his daddy somebody that he don't want to claim as his daddy. Or maybe he's been telling this narrative as who his mama is, but now we discover it's somebody else, and he's just embarrassed. And that's really nobody's business. He's a born citizen, he's president, so he's locking this down. Then we discover he locks down all of his documents, his college documents.
That's right.
And someone else is looking into his Social Security number. There's all kind of anomalies with that. Someone else is investigating his selective service records. They find all kinds of fake digital manipulation of that.
Was it his own brother around that same time that had kind of insinuated that he was
more
actually...
than that. More than that. His own brother insinuates and claims that he's not from there. His sister, his half-sister, stepsister says he was born in Kenya, and I was there. His paternal grandmother says he was born in Kenya. I was there. Ogega, that's the last name of the ambassador of Kenya, is on an American radio broadcast days after the election. I've got the clip of it because it disappeared from the internet. I was smart enough back then to know I better download this because this is going to disappear.
Yeah.
Ogega is on an American radio program, two country boy hosts Got him on the show. It's a big station out of New York or Chicago or someplace, but they sound like a couple of country boys, and they're interviewing him, and they're having fun, and everybody's saying, and Ogega, we know you're thrilled to have, America's first black president. He says, yes, and he's from Kenya, and we know we're going to put a monument up in the village where he was born. We know where he was born, and this is live over there. Well, the two country boys, they're on this audio clip saying, really? You know where he was born. They're baiting him, and they're not letting on that they smell a rat. They're just baiting him, and the guy just keeps going on. So you've got the ambassador saying it. You've got his paternal mother, grandmother saying it. You've got a half sister saying it. You've got his half brother saying it. They could all be lying or mistaken. But
why would the family be lying about where he was born?
Well, and then we discovered that his publicist for like 15 years, I could be mistaken, it's 11 years, 15 years, it's in my mind, for a long time, when he was supposedly a young student at Harvard and was writing and stuff, he had a publicist. And they had on their publicity report, and back then they didn't have internet, so it went out on a hard print thing. It was mailed to everybody. That's how they sold books and stuff in those days.
Right.
And it said on there in black and white, his bio, born in Kenya, raised in Hawaii, Barack Obama, this up-and-coming political superstar, and it was going on, just really promoting him. Now, the bio, listen, I've been an author for 2 different publishers for a long time. I have to provide bios. I have to provide the bio.
Sure.
Right.
Are you hearing me?
Yeah.
I have to provide the bio. And then the bio is edited to make sure I'm not a grammatic idiot. But then I have to approve it.
Right.
And review it. So how, when he finally is running for president, that's brought out, then all of a sudden his publicist comes forward, we made a mistake. That was an editor's problem. He didn't mean that. We did that. It's our fault. So they took the heat. Well, none of my publishers would ever take the heat for something I lied about in my bio, but they did. Because why? Because he's going to be president now.
Right.
So Carl,
Yeah.
I know there's a part of this that our audience is very anxious to hear you discuss, and that's the supernatural way in which you actually went from being this guy that's out there, doing radio and whatever, and thinking about this and asking questions.
Getting involved.
But then, you fast forward into the future, you're actually working with
I'm working with
the
and deputized.
investigators. You're deputized under Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Tell that story.
Well, yeah, and so what happens then, 2011, it comes out, and I'm gonna tell that story, but then I want to back up and explain, because this is very important for your audience, how Sheriff Arpaio even got involved. What was his authority to be involved? And why is he the only law enforcement officer ever, anywhere in the world, who dared to investigate this? That's amazing to think about. Not 10 sheriff's offices looked at it, or not the FBI and the CIA and everybody looked at it because they were concerned for national security. Nobody, including federal law enforcement agencies. So the bottom line is 2011, all this broke out. Sheriff Arpaio got involved, and I'll explain how. That's a very important part of the story. But to answer your question, then they had a press conference. Because again, we were all still naive back then. We're thinking, okay, surely with the evidence they found, they've had 3 press conferences. The last one was December 2016. I was in Phoenix, Arizona as a deputized member of the sheriff's office under Joe Arpaio as a special deputy for that investigation. But prior to that, sometime 2011, I think it was, the first press conference, then 4, 5, 6 months later, they held a second press conference, and then in 2016, the third one. So during the first press conference, my wife and I are watching this. It was streamed live. We're watching it together. And remember, at this time, I'm a pastor and a radio guy. And I'm not a criminal investigator. I'm just a radio guy, but I'm investigating it to the best of my ability. And all this that I've already told is all in my mind. I'm reporting on my radio program. Look at the intrigue. Look at I smell a rat in this. Then comes the sheriff's office that's actually doing a criminal forensic investigation. Well, my antennas are up because that's what I used to do. And so I get my wife says, let's watch this. And we were watching it. I first see Mike Zullo. I didn't know him from anybody. I see him, I say, Zullo, that's an Italian name, man. Well, come to find out he's from New Jersey. Forget about it. I know a guy, So,
and what is his role?
Yeah, well, he's the lead investigator under Joe Arpaio on this birth certificate issue. And again, I'll explain to your audience how that even got started. But I'm watching this with my wife, and it's so fascinating, and it's verifying everything I'm suspicioning. Now it's being verified by some forensics and some criminal investigation, and they've come to the conclusion the thing's a fake. It's got problems. They admit, we haven't gotten to the bottom of this. There's probably a ton more forensics, but we're sharing with you today the forensics that we know and that we're allowed to share.
On the birth certificate.
Yeah, and they're sharing it publicly. It's streamed live on YouTube and carried by some channels, and media was there. But the thing is, Arpaio, as that investigation was coming to conclusion, he had been telling the media that he conducted it and that he wanted to be the sheriff to clear the president on these accusations. And there's a reason, there's a story behind it. So the media's there with bated breath, and they're wanting to do interviews with Zullo and Arpaio afterwards because they are thinking the sheriff is going to exonerate our, and I'm now can say, our fake dude.
Yeah.
Maybe we have faked the sheriff out. I'm convinced that's what they were thinking because they were all like, yeah, if Arpaio put his stamp on it, we've won.
America's toughest sheriff.
Yes, America's toughest sheriff says this is a legitimate burst. I know that's what they were thinking. Now I know it, knowing all that I know. But so I'm watching this. My wife and I are there. I turned to her. Remember, I've never met Joe Arpaio. I've seen him on Fox News, America's Toughest Sheriff. Don't know, have a clue who Mike Zullo is. I turned to her and I say, and this is the first time, by the way, I'm sharing with your audience. This is the first time I've ever shared this. Mike Zullo knows this whole story. My family knows it, and that's it. Now your audience is going to hear this. I'm a believer, and I believe that God directs our paths, and I believe that from time to time He speaks to us and tells us how our paths are going to be directed. I didn't hear His voice like you're hearing mine, but in my chest, I told my wife, I said, I don't know. I said, please don't think I'm crazy, and don't think I'm vain. I don't know how in the world this would work. 330 million people live in this nation. How would this work? But I'm going to be involved with these guys. I said, I wished I was a deputy under him back when I was a kid. I mean, a young officer. I said, man, I could work for an Arpaio. You know, I'm saying this to my wife. I said, but somehow I'm going to be connected to this. And she said, well, yes. And if God's in this, it will happen. And she's very supportive, and she didn't call me crazy or anything. And I said, well, we'll see. If it happens, it happens. If not, it doesn't. Well, speeding the story up very quickly, so I go back to the radio. I'm just doing my thing. I didn't call them, but somehow Mike Zullo got my name that I was a radio guy on a real station that was actually talking about this frequently, and contact was made with me, I think through a friend of Zullo's. He didn't call me and asked to come on, but a friend did, said if you'll call this number, he'll probably come on and talk to you. So I called him thinking he ain't gonna come on my show. He says, yeah, I'd love to. All the media we need to get out here because the press conference the media ignored.
Right.
We didn't tell them what they wanted to hear. So they shut us down. And boy, do I have some revelations and stories on that later. But so the bottom line is, I call him. He says, yeah, I'll come on. I said, okay, cool. So he calls the station, and before we go on the air, I'm talking to him off air, and I discover, because I just asked him if he's a believer. I said, oh, yeah, we're very involved in our church, and we're believers. And I said, well, I'm a pastor. He says, yeah, I heard that. He said, that's awesome. I said, well, let's just pray before we go on the air. He says, he said, I've done a lot of interviews. You're the first person that's ever prayed with me. He says, I'd be honored to. So we prayed. Well, he went on the air. Well, it was strictly forensics, but we didn't turn it into a supernatural story. It was just, here's Mike Zullo, the lead investigator. He comes on the air. We're talking about it. We're unpacking it. We finished with that. I talked to him off the air. I said, listen, can you come on a couple of weeks from now and give us a little update? Yeah, sure. So he comes back. After that one, he calls me then and he says, we need to kind of, listen, I'm going to confide in you with all of your experience, and now you're on the radio. He said, we need some media help. I'm going to be giving you some information from time to time, and you've got to keep it close to vest. I think he probably tested me early on. I think he probably gave me some tidbits just to see if I would say it. But the bottom line is, I didn't. I was loyal. The next thing I know, some months later pass, CPAC is going on in Washington. I'm invited to attend with Zullo to go into the White House, to Congress to interview congressmen, to give them this pack of all the information that we had developed, he had developed, but I was now involved in reporting. And so that how can that be? All of a sudden, what I told my wife on the couch is now reality. I'm in Washington, D.C., in Congressman's office with the lead investigator, making presentations to Congress with the blessings of Sheriff Arpaio, that I just watched them on this press conference, and I'm turned to my wife and said, I'm going to be involved in this deeply. Well, now I'm like up to here in it. Back then I was up to here. But now, so that answers that question. Now, back up and
Well, but then you also wound up becoming deputized under
Yes.
Arpaio. When did that happen? How did that happen?
that happened early 2016. And the reason why, he said, well, why didn't he do it before? Well, I was kind of unofficially. I mean, Arpaio knew I was working with Zulo. They were very thankful for me opening my radio program because most of the media had shut them down. But I still was a real media guy. I had a real radio station, and now we were streaming live over the internet because all that happened during those days. Now we were hooked onto TuneIn Radio app and iHeart and all of that, and now we had websites built with streaming, and then we were podcasting. So he says, man, we need you. So in 2016, I was also asked by the Trump campaign to open his rally in Florida as he was running for president in January 2016, Pensacola. There were like 12, 15,000 people in this civic center, and I opened it at the request of his campaign officials. So Arpaio, who knew Donald Trump, I don't think they were like bosom buddies back then, but they knew each other very well. Two very important men in the nation, and Trump had a place in Phoenix, and so they knew each other. Well, of course, he knows I'm directly connected to all of this with Zulo. Zulo's always going back to the sheriff and saying, look, Gallups is going to have me on. We're going to disclose this. Is this okay with you, Sheriff? Yes. Tell Gallups I appreciate what he's doing. So we had that kind of relationship. Well, they found Arpaio, saw all of this and saw my connection to the guy that's probably going to be president. And that's when he said, look, this is getting ready to get deep. He says, I'm going to deputize you. And he says it's for both of our protection. Number one, I need to hold you accountable for what you say from now on, because you've been involved in this, you're up to here. And now the guy that stuck the finger in the chest of the guy who has the fake birth certificate is going to be president. Thus the Mueller report. Are y'all following me? Thus the Mueller investigation.
Right.
We're going to get to that in a moment. But Arpaio says, so I need to hold you accountable. And so this way you're officially working for me in this area. And he says, and you need to hold us accountable because you don't want it to be that we're feeding you false information. He said, we wouldn't do that, but you need to be able to speak with authority when we give you information for broadcast. So you need to be able to say, look, I'm deputized as a special deputy. Sheriff Arpaio himself did it in his office. With his press people, they're taking pictures of us, me being deputized. He said, you need to be able to say that. And he says, so I'm going to do this. So flew me out to Arizona and did that. And then I was from there on, I was in several 3 and 4 and 5 hour meetings with Sheriff Joe Arpaio in his office. One time by him, just me and Joe. Other times with Mike Zulo there and various people. So that's how deeply, here I am sitting on a couch with my wife. I'm going to be deeply connected. I was a prophet. Never claimed to be a prophet, but God spoke that to me. And now I become deputized. I'm in Arpaio's office. I'm sitting on these deep, dark, secret meetings for hours and hours with the lead investigator. I'm in Washington. We're in the Congress buildings. I'm on the radio. It's surreal when I think about it. I'm sitting here telling the story. It almost sounds fake. It's just so surreal, but it's all true. But here's how the whole thing started. So in 2011, when all of this stuff is going on and Trump is putting his finger, this thing that supposedly didn't exist, all of a sudden is now on the website. The book is being released. Osama bin Laden's being killed. News cycles are changing. Everybody realizes that's a cover-up trying to get everybody's attention off the birth certificate. Something stinks. About that time, Sheriff Arpaio is getting ready to run for office, 2012, again, for another term. And every rally he goes to, he's being... His constituents, they are livid because they smell the same rat. Millions of people around the United States are smelling it by now. And they keep saying to him, what are we going to do about this fake president? Well, Arpaio didn't really know a whole lot about it then. And he kept saying, what are you talking about? He said, well, here's the thing. That document he's got there is fake and there's proof and he's not even eligible. And he would say, well, look, he said, I don't have any jurisdiction. And they said, well, what if the citizens of Arizona were defrauded in the last election and on our ballot was a guy running for president who was not eligible? Yeah. You have that authority. And at first Arpaio said, well, he tried to keep pushing it off. He just didn't want to get involved because he didn't really see the urgency of it. He didn't know what I knew back then. He was just doing his job, trying to keep illegals coming across the border. Well, he went to one rally and they presented him with a petition, 200 or 300 signatures on it, people demanding that he do something. So he promised him, he said, I will do an investigation. So he calls in Mike Zulo, who at the time was the head of the cold case posse. He calls him in. He said, I'm making you lead investigator on this. He said, I want to be known as the sheriff that clears this birth certificate thing up. Those were his words. He said that then. Zulo told me he said that. He's been on my show, Arpaio has, and said, that's what I said. That's what I said. And he said, I actually thought it was all a big hoax. I thought it was all a big conspiracy theory. And so he calls in Zulo. He says, Zulo comes in. Zulo knows nothing about it. He's just an investigator out there doing his job. He's not paying attention to any of this birth certificate stuff. He comes in. Sheriff has to educate him on it. He says, okay, well, that'd be simple. We should be able to prove that in no time. After 4, 5, 6 days of investigating it, and he's got these people, lawyers and other retired investigators helping him. They look at it and they say, this thing stinks to high heaven. They pull it apart forensically. This is not real. This is not real. He goes to the sheriff, says, Sheriff, you need to sit down.
Now, is this before or after it actually went to forensic laboratories?
Before. So then what happens is, they were doing their internal forensics, but it finally went to these international forensic laboratories.
One laboratory of which was actually in support of Donald Trump and said, you need to know coming in, we support Donald Trump, and we will not do anything.
Yes, that's out of Hawaii. Yeah. In fact, this was the integrity of Sheriff Arpaio and Mike Zulo. They went to him on purpose because they knew he was deeply connected to Perkins Coie. He'd done some work.
So he was a supporter of Barack Obama.
And he was a big supporter of Barack Obama.
Is what I meant.
Perkins
Coie. And neither of the two laboratories knew that the other one was.
Yes, but that's different.
Okay.
I'll keep going you're speaking truth, but the time frames are swapped. Okay. So what happens is Sheriff Arpaio brings in Mike Zulo and says, investigate it. Mike Zulo goes back to the sheriff and says, this has got problems. You're not going to be able to exonerate this president. Well, Arpaio's sweating bullets now. He said, oh my gosh, what have we uncovered here? And Zulo sits down and says, this is fake. Something's bad, wrong here. Why would a president do this? And so Arpaio said, well, we got to call a press conference. And so about this time is when the Obama administration starts focusing on Arpaio for his how he's handling arresting illegals, things like that. And Obama has issued executive orders tweaking federal law. Under my administration, you're not going to enforce this and you're not going to enforce this. But in the meantime, Arpaio gets his lawyers because he's got a responsibility to the state constitution and to protect their borders. And their state attorney general said, you better do these things. You better protect us. So Arpaio's caught in a mess. State attorney generals threatening, we'll put you in jail if you don't, or we'll take you out of office. Obama's saying, we'll put you in jail or take you out of office if you do. Yeah. So Arpaio erred on the side. He was a federal law enforcement officer, DEA, a district supervisor in the Middle East, Mexico, and Western United States. Arpaio's a sharp dude. So he just says, I'm going to err on the side of federal law, regardless of executive orders under one administration, and the fact I'm a law enforcement officer of the state. I've got to protect my state, so I'm just going to do it come what may. And that's what he did, and Obama and them knew he would do it, and so they focused in on him, trying to take him out and make him look somehow kind of criminal or illegitimate, so that when he did bring his information forward on the birth certificate, he was discredited. Right. So bottom line is, in 2011-ish, somewhere in there, he's presenting his first press conference. That's when my wife and I are sitting there watching that. All right, so bottom line, as it moves forward, a few months later, they find more stuff. And so they give another press conference. But in the meantime, media's not reporting anything. And Mike Zulo did disclose on one of my interviews with him just recently, he'd been hinting to this over the years, but he did disclose that Rush Limbaugh's show, Sean Hannity's show, and another MSNBC, I can't remember his name right now.
Was it Ed Schultz?
No. It was another guy.
Keith Olbermann?
No. You're going to really come. You keep throwing names out there, I'll never remember it. But I'll think of it later. But another big name, MSNBC. After that first press conference, them not knowing that they were going to say, we cannot exonerate him. After Arpaio had been out there saying, I want to be able to exonerate him. I want to be, and the media's going, yes. Well, when they heard that he didn't, they refused to report on it. So then they came out with a second press conference with more evidence They didn't even show up. I mean, a few little scragglers, little affiliates, and that was it. None of the major networks. Then already orders were coming down, apparently, out of Washington and federal agencies. Leave this alone. Shut up. Do not mention this. People were being threatened. People were being compromised. We have media people that came to Arpaio and Zullo later and said, we wanted to report on it. We were told no. Well, Zullo just revealed that Rush Limbaugh's show, he had a guest host sitting in for him who had told Zullo, I want you on my show for the whole 3 hours. We're going to talk about nothing but this. The producer found out about it just before they going on the air and says, you will not do this. And if you do this, you will never work in radio again. And this guy was a big radio dude, had his own show. And he said, we will destroy you. Now, Zullo promised he would not give that guest host's name, and he has not. But the guest host called Zullo and said, this is what's happened to me. I can't have you on. I'm so sorry. In the meantime, Sean Hannity's producers called Zullo and says, we cancel our interview. We're not having you on. The MSNBC guy said, we're canceling our interview. We don't want you on. Why? He didn't have the message they wanted. So that's how nasty that got there. So in the meantime, the investigation continues. Barack Obama's coming up for another election, 2012. By then, after that was over, sometime after that, a CIA whistleblower comes to Arpaio and Zullo, and reveals that he is the inventor of CIA, Department of Homeland Security, NSA software, whereby you could breach into government websites anywhere, anybody's website. You can breach into my computer and never leave a trail. You could implant URLs to make it look like you were on child pornography sites, or whatever. You could download child pornography and hide it, put the URLs as though you had been surfing the web for it, back out, never leave a trail. I mean, it's called the hammer. You could just take a hammer and do what you wanted to any computer in the world. And this guy came and was presenting this. Well, Zullo and Arpaio didn't just lap it up like dogs. They did their due diligence. They brought this guy in months and months. They made him show and tell and explain, and he got on a computer and demonstrated it, and they were like, my gosh. And then he turned over documents showing how their records had been breached, their offices had been breached, Donald Trump had been breached, John Roberts had been breached, the Supreme Court Justice.
Yep.
And they started showing him all this documentation. And after the 2012 election, he showed them documentation wherein Florida's election system had been tampered with and Illinois election system had been tampered with. Chicago and Florida. Obama coming from Chicago. And that he made the allegations to Arpaio and Zullo that actually the votes were manipulated for that 2012 election, and then gave them the documentation. And that's when Mike Zullo came on my show and was saying, guys, this is getting deep, this is getting dark, this is going to a nasty place. There's a coup going on. He said that long before. I mean, now that word's coming up now.
Right.
Years ago, Zullo came on my show and said, there's something dark and nasty happening. There's a coup, and somehow our government law enforcement agencies are involved. And he said, I fear for our nation. This is, and we were summarily dismissed as conspiracy theory, kooks, racist, idiots. I mean, that's how this works.
Right.
See, so he had to delegitimize us. And so then in the meantime, they're dragging Sheriff Arpaio into court over the immigration stuff, trying to put him in jail, calling Zullo and I idiots and disparaging us all over the media. But now we're years down the road, and now everything we were talking about is now coming out. Mueller report actually brings some of it out. Other people are admitting to it. Now we've got texts between Strzok and Page who actually talked about the CIA informant in their text. We have documents of that. This James Baker, who was the attorney for Comey under FBI, he is actually in a closed-door congressional hearing where he actually speaks of, yes, a CIA whistleblower came, he brought documentation to the FBI. Well, what was it about? And Baker says it was about spying on American citizens. That was after they had promised that was not going on. I mean, it's just everything Zullo and I were trying to tell this nation years ago was happening, and we were being called liars. Of course, the Obama administration was in charge. It was easy to do that.
Right.
Now it's all coming out that it was all factual, and we knew it was factual. We just endured the slander because we knew what we knew. we had the hard copy stuff.
Let me ask you, there's, as you're talking, there's a couple of things.
Yeah.
I'm listening to you talk, and I'm thinking, okay, if I'm the person that's watching this interview,
Yeah.
and you've said that you have forensics evidence, so first of all, you've got something that we can view.
Yes, that's exactly where I was going.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank
No,
you.
you're right. No, I was going there. So,
And then after that, we want
Yes.
to come back to this Mueller thing.
okay, yes, but I wanted to lay all of that foundation so that when we show your audience what we show them, and when I tell them what I'm getting ready to tell them, now they have the whole foundation and the backstory, and now they know due diligence has been done for years on this. This wasn't just something that was stumbled across or just thrown together. It's not a fake piece. But the bottom line is this: in the December 2016 press conference, right before Arpaio went out of office, and right before Donald Trump was sworn in, this press conference was held, but that's where it was revealed that forensics had been done by two international forensic examination, digital document forensic examination companies. So how that happened is that, I don't remember the exact timeline now, but right before 2016, maybe it was in 2015, something like that, Mike Zullo and his internal helpers in forensics had discovered that this document that they knew was fake, they finally figured out exactly how it was faked. And I can't give away all the information of how it was figured out, but I can tell you this, and you're going to see, your audience is going to see it with their own eyes in a moment. In their files from all their investigation that went all the way back to 2011, they had several real Hawaii birth certificates, the famous Nordyke twins birth certificates that were given to Zullo to compare. Another one called Johanna Ani, a woman who was born the same year, same month, I think maybe the same day or maybe the same week, so that you can look and see what a certificate coming from that time should look like.
Okay.
Well, in looking, they looked at Obama's, looked at hers, and it looked like Obama's could be. Everything looked in order. But then Zullo and his forensics team, the people that were helping him, they looked at it and said, oh my gosh, am I really seeing this? And they looked at some of the information on these, how they wound up with this document. People being born on a certain week in Hawaii, there weren't that many anyway. There weren't like tens of thousands.
Right.
Maybe a score. But still, how could they have wound up? Another supernatural element. And there's a long story how he got it, and I'm not going to tell it. It's too long and boring. But the bottom line is, in his files, he had the document that was used
To create
the fake one from the ground up. How did he know? He and his forensics people were looking at it, and they saw the date stamps that were put on by hand. They were exactly in the exact same spots of Johanna Ani's in the little boxes and at the angle. See, they're put on by hand. The date stamps couldn't be typed on or anything. There was stamps. So they looked, and not only were they in the exact same positions in those boxes, but in the exact same angles. That's impossible. If you're just stamping birth certificate, you can't make that happen. And
Not
so
exactly,
that was the first clue. And they said, well, we've got to get this. We've got to do micro measurements forensically. We can't just do it with our eyes. But with our eyes, this looks identical. So we're going to look at that. Then they started looking, and they discovered 6 or 7 or 8, as many as 9 other anomalies wherein information that was on these appeared to be lifted directly off and put on a blank template to build this template. Then when they looked even closer, they discovered that they were in exact mathematical juxtaposition to each other. And they were lifted off of her document onto this document. I think now might be a good time to break and to let the audience see exactly what I'm talking about. And we'll go deeper when we come back, but I want them to see this.
Okay.
The bottom line synopsis of the Sheriff Arpaio Mike Zullo Obama fraudulent birth certificate investigation as of their December 15th, 2016 press conference in Phoenix, Arizona is as follows. We now know that the Obama certificate of live birth posted on the White House website in April of 2011 is a forensically proven fabrication, forgery, and thus a fraudulent document. Not only do we know this, but we know how it was done. And we have at least one of the source documents from which the forgery was made. There are 9 points of currently discovered forgery artifacts verified to have been placed on the Obama birth certificate from this source document, utilizing a digital cut and paste method. 2 different digital document examiners on 2 different continents using 2 different methodology, each examination entity unaware the other was working on the same material, both of them arrived at similar conclusions. The Obama document is a forgery and was digitally fabricated. Each of these document examination entities are renowned in their field. They are used to train law enforcement agencies, and they hold unimpeachable credentials and records of success as expert witnesses. One is located in the United States, the other is in Europe. The evidence indicates that words, date stamps, and the letter X used to fill in certain boxes on the Obama fabricated document were, in fact, digitally lifted from a certified Hawaiian birth certificate of one Johanna Ani and pasted onto the Obama fabrication template. The amazing correlations to these forensic facts are that the date stamps, 2 of them, were transported from the Ani document to the Obama document and applied at the exact same angles for both of the stamps, a virtual impossibility unless digital cut and paste forgery is involved. The other anomaly is that the remaining words that were transferred from the Ani certificate to the Obama document were lifted as a group, and they were placed on the Obama document at the exact same relational juxtaposition to each other. Added to these statistical impossibilities was the placement of an X from the Ani document to the Obama document. The X was not only copied from the Ani birth certificate, but that X was originally placed a bit outside of its original placement box, and the top right-hand part of the X then bled over into a portion of the word above it. Amazingly, when the X from the Ani document was lifted, so was the complete box in which it was originally found, as well as that portion of the bleed over and the word above the box. They are an exact match on both documents. This startling fact is what prompted the U.S. document expert to declare this piece of evidence as the nail in the coffin in his official executive summary report of his overall findings, declaring the Obama document to be a forgery. Now, what remains is the question, why? None of the possible answers to this question are good ones. In fact, the answer may go directly to grave national security concerns. If Congress can investigate steroid use in baseball and underinflated footballs in the NFL, shouldn't they be held accountable in the complete and exhaustive investigation into this latest criminal investigation finding concerning Obama's birth certificate? If not, they are complicit in this potential crime of the ages.
When you watch it on the screen, Carl, it's obvious. That's incredible.
Yeah.
How did Zulo and the team find this out?
Yeah, it's a different mental picture, isn't it? I mean, me talking about it is one thing, but to actually see, oh my gosh, all of these elements were lifted from Johanna Ani, no doubt. They're mathematically juxtaposed, and the angles and the distances between them. And then, as that film pointed out, and I really want to punch this before I answer your question, is that X. Mm-hmm. That X that was in the box on Johanna Ani's that was at the top of the box, bled over the box and bled into the words above it. And that leaves ink splatters. They're like fingerprints.
Right.
And when you examine it forensically, it's, so that one X was moved into 2 boxes on Obama's, and with the exact ink spots and the exact spaces. I mean, it's what one of the forensic examiners called, this is the smoking gun. Mm-hmm. This is it. This is the hammer that hit the nail. This is the nail in the coffin, is what they said. In their report, they actually used those words. This is the nail in the coffin, was that X. Everything else was. But the X was like, you can't dispute this. Mm-hmm. It came from Johanna Ani's document. Now, no legitimate document would have elements from another document. This was manufactured. Then when you include the date stamps and everything else that you just saw, it's beyond
And again,
question.
This is back in a day when you had to use a manual typewriter to fill out these forms. This is not a computerized form and a hand stamp. So you're not going to get that kind of precise duplication from document to document like today when it's all computerized. You
could accidentally, coincidentally get close to key strikes, like maybe it hits the box in the wrong spot and all that. But
again, you're talking about a day when you had to manually insert the paper into the roller and line it up. So the odds of this happening are infinitesimally small.
That's right. Impossible.
Yeah.
Impossible. Like the guy said, nail in the coffin, impossible. This cannot happen unless it's manipulated. So you asked the question, well, how did all this come about? Well, very, very quickly, the bottom line is, so this investigation never stopped. I mean, people kept saying, well, they're done, they've given up. No, it's that under the Obama administration, where could they go with it? Mm-hmm. You're going to take it to Eric Holder? You're going to take it to Loretta Lynch?
Loretta Lynch, yeah.
You're going to take it to James Comey? You're going to take it to John Brennan? I mean, you're going to take it to Barack Obama? Mm-hmm. You're going to take it to Congress that's compromised and has never uttered a word about it? You're going to take it to the media that wouldn't even come to the press conferences? Who are you going to take it to? Mm-hmm. Well, they're taking it to my radio program, and we're putting it all over the internet, and millions of people are listening to the radio program and seeing it on the internet combined. And so the word's out there, but as far as bringing it to a hearing, a congressional hearing or a DOJ investigation or an FBI investigation, that ain't going to happen under Obama. That was the whole purpose of the deep state, was to protect and to hide the fact that the man that was in office didn't have legitimate identifying documents.
Were threats being made in the background against media, personality, people, we can ruin your careers? Or was that kind of...
Yes, and I've already alluded a little bit to that when Zullo said that Rush Limbaugh's guest host and the producer said, you'll never work in radio again. Right. Sean Hannity's people said, no, you can't talk about it. The MSNBC guys, you can't talk about it. And there are more big names like that. And that Zullo had contact with. So yes, we know that. Plus, again, we've got the document showing that John Roberts was breached, and other important people and other congressmen, Sheriff Arpaio's, all of his information.
Now, who are so once the internal forensics people that are working under Arpaio are finding this, then you want to get somebody outside.
Right.
That can independently view it. How did that happen?
Okay, and the way that happens is, so once Mike Zullo had all this stuff, he understood that this was huge. It was pointing to an attempted coup. It was pointing to something our nation has never experienced before.
And stay on track, but I'm also thinking if you put a fraudulent document up on a U.S. government website, are you breaking some federal laws?
Yes. First of all, it is illegal, even at the state level, but at federal level, it's illegal to produce fake documentation. If I make a fake driver's license and I get caught with it, I'm going to prison. In the state of Florida, that's where I'm from, probably any other state. So it's illegal to manufacture fake identification. It's illegal to possess it. It's illegal to put it on a government website as your official documentation. Mm-hmm. These are all felonies, federal crimes. It's illegal then to use it to gain an office with it. Then it is illegal to present it to the whole nation, to the public, saying, these are my identifying documents. There's at least 5 federal crimes committed here, not counting uploading it to the server, employing other people to be a part of it, and conspiracy, and and not counting the fact that probably government agencies were involved in it. I mean, it gets deep and
so
dark.
I interrupted you because that kind of suddenly came to me, and I wondered with your law enforcement background, so you were going to tell us about the forensic lab.
Yes, and so once he discovered the stuff that your audience just saw, and his internal forensics, they saw it. And of course, they reported on it at that 2016 conference. But prior to that, and they talk about this in the 2016 conference in another section, where Zullo realized this is huge. This is real. It is huge. The fact that nobody will listen to it tells them it's real. The reason they're taking flack is because they're over the target. Mm-hmm. So then he realizes, I've got to get even more verification. I mean, he knows what he knows, and he knows it's accurate. And you can see it with your eyes. But he says, I'm just going to double check. See, this is the integrity these people have. And then the integrity goes even deeper, because when he chooses these companies, he chooses a company in America and one in Europe. Both of them have high reputations. The one in America is out of Hawaii. The guy that runs it has written books for law enforcement officers on how to tell what forgeries are. He has worked for Perkins Coie law firm, which is connected to Obama and all these people deeply, and to the Democrats and a lot of their shenanigans, and the Mueller report and the dossier. Perkins Coie, that same people. This guy worked for them. He also did contract work